Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon, and I have returned from the Bremen Regional Championships, where I managed to make a top 16 finish with good old Xerneas BREAK, a deck that, for any of you who have been following me for a while, know that it's a deck that I've played before, and it's one that I've defaulted back to for this event. So I'll be going through round by round and why I chose this deck. So first of all, how did I get to Xerneas BREAK? I really didn't want to be playing Xerneas BREAK. In fact, I was testing a lot of different decks in the lead up to Bremen. I was expecting lots of Gardevoir, lots of collective Garbodor variants, with Golisopod being the most likely, most popular. Maybe a handful of Metagross, some Volcanion, and some Ho-Oh-Salazzle in there as well. Pretty much those are the top decks, and then all sorts of other things around as well. Maybe a bit of Vikabulu, there's been hype of that as well. So those were the sorts of decks that I was trying to test against and make sure I had a good matchup. The first thing on my list was always to have a good Gardevoir. And second of all, I just wanted to be simple and consistent because it was one of the earliest regionals of the year. And people are still figuring out the format. Versus Seeker's gone. So it's basically whoever has the most consistent list wins the game a lot of the time. So that's really what I went for, and you can sort of see how that reflects in this list, where I'm playing 4 Lele, 2 Bridget, so I don't ever miss Bridget, and then just Oranguru to fall back on for late game ends to make sure I can close the game. That is one of the best things about Xerneas, is that it's stupidly consistent, because it's so easy to get things going. If you lead Xerneas, you just need an energy and some way to access Bridget, which we have 10 outs to find. And that's, even if you go first, you don't need to do that on the first turn anyway, so that can be over 2 turns, which is nuts. Obviously, if you don't lead Xerneas, it gets a little bit more complicated. You need things like Fairy Gardens and stuff, but it's typically quite an easy deck that does the same thing in and out, whatever. But yeah, the decks I was testing a lot of Volcanion. For those who saw the stream, that's actually the last video we did. We have been a bit behind on videos lately, and we're going to pick that up again soon, so don't worry. Tested a lot of Volk. I really like Octillery and Volk at the moment, but I didn't pull the trigger on it because I wasn't content with my Gardevoir matchup. Didn't think I wanted to go too techie in order to fix it. I tried a bit of Ho-Oh-Salazzle as well, and I did get techie with that list. I tried putting Bisharp in, and that tested quite okay, I guess. It was quite YOLO, in that you hit Kiawe, you often win games, and then when you're against Gardevoir specifically, if you hit Kukui on the right turns with your Bisharp, you win the game. But it was really kind of YOLO, and I'm really glad I didn't pull the trigger on that deck, because it was certainly less consistent than Xerneas, which I ended up defaulting back to. Basically, this was in the back of my mind, knowing like, yeah, it's fine, it's simple. Attaching energy on the board is always good against everything because we have a high damage output for a non-EX. So essentially, I limited my own options just by testing lots of other things, and basically crossing out things as I went, just thinking, no, don't like this deck, don't want to play Guardy because it's on the radar and it's a stage 2, don't play Metagross because super ability reliant and there's going to be too much Garb. And there's also going to be Fire decks. Didn't like the Fire decks because they couldn't beat Guardy enough. So really I picked Xerneas because it has no real auto loss, until I actually turned up in Bremen and found out what the auto loss was, which I'll tell you in a minute. But in theory it had no like matchup that you simply can't win. I think going into the tournament I was most scared of Kiawe Fire decks. But after myself testing it, I was thinking only a few people would bring it because it can't consistently beat Gardevoir inherently unless they go super techie on their end. And if they go techie, they're less, likely to do what they want to do when they come up against things like my deck. So yeah, I think Xerneas is just simple. You guys know what it does. It just ramps up a bunch of energy and smacks really hard. Now that Versus Seeker's gone, we gain spaces for like 4 choice band, which is crazy. Like, the ramp is just nuts in this deck. When you have like 2 turns of Geomancy, you almost always win. That's pretty much how it goes, and it's getting to that point where you can have 2 Geomancies off. Either your opponent's a stage 2 deck, and you know, they evolve up into Curliers, they start beaconing for their first 2 turns, you pretty much win because there's too much energy on your board. Or they just have slow starts, missed attachments. So if you can Guzma things early and slow them down, force them to dig for like float stones and big combo cards, you win the game because you've just been able to Geomancy a bunch and they can't wipe off all the damage, and eventually you're just doing too much damage every single turn for an Oni-X. And that was the case a lot of my games, and I just like the simplicity of Xerneas. I'll go on to why I won't play it again in the future, but it's just a really simple deck, and that's kind of what I was looking for the event. I was just kind of wanting to do the same thing every single game, no matter what I was up against. And I think when you see the Swiss rounds that I go through, I faced like all different decks. So having something that can just do its own thing, be the problem that the opponent has to find a solution for, is a really good trait in a deck. So I guess I'll start with round by round. Round 1 I have Vika Bulu. This has traditionally been a matchup that I've been scared of. Now though, Vika Bulu oftentimes has cut Fury Belt in favour of choice bands so that it can improve its Gardevoir matchup. And in taking out Fury Belts, it improves a lot of things for this deck because firstly, their HP is less, so we don't have to ramp as high. And secondly, their Bulu is now doing 120 instead of 130, so they're being forced to either waste their GX attack to retain energy, or they're having to get rid of all their energy. And most of the time, the opponent will opt to get rid of all their energy, and when they do that, you can simply Guzma KO their Vika Volts in the back and force them to have no attackers remaining. So that was a double win. I think in game 1 they couldn't get anything going. It was just dead draw, GG. In game 2 they didn't get Vika Volt on turn 2. I think they got it on turn 3, which gives me time to Geomancy. And as I've already mentioned, when you get given time against, like if Xerneas is given time, it is a deadly deck. Like it just can't lose basically when it's been given too much time. And unfortunately, that's just, if decks don't draw optimally, they don't beat Xerneas. That's just how it sort of feels. So even something like Vika Bulu that I was previously scared of is now just a 2-0 in the first round. In round 2, I'm up against actually Complexity Card Gaming teammate Maze Brenninkmeyer. He's playing Gliscopod Garbodor. In game 1, he prizes 2 ends, which really hurts him on a crucial turn where he... So the previous turn, I was able to Field Blower, Oranguru, draw up some cards, get myself down to 2 prizes. And then he went for Tapu Lele to try and find an end, but he prized 2. So he couldn't end me out of the hand, and the hand I had was Guzma Choice Band Energy, which were the 3 cards that I needed to win the following turn, to finish off his Tapu Lele with my Tapu Lele, it turned out, because he was doing the right things against Xerneas with Gliscopod, where you do some Cocoa spreads so that Gliscopod's actually one-hit Xerneas breaks. And so basically you go for 1 flying flip, so then all of these 130 HP ones in range of early Gliscopod, and then at some point you recover the Cocoa with Rescue Stretcher and do a second flip, which then finishes off the things that he wasn't able to clean up earlier when they break evolve. So he did the right thing in trying to deal with Xerneas all at once, because then I don't get EXP share activation and I lose multiple attackers on certain turns. So it's me sort of scrabbling around trying to find stretchers, rods, and getting things back into play while not really having any attackers. So he had the right approach. Just in game 1 he didn't have N. In game 2 I take kind of like a risky line where I lead Lele. I see he just attaches to a Wimpod and passes. He attaches a Rainbow to Wimpod, which puts it down to 60 HP. I have Lele in hand, and I also have Guzma in hand, I believe. No, I have... I think I had Bridget in hand, but I also had Lele. So I Lele for Guzma, and then I DCE, kill his Wimpod, and then he just repromotes his Trubbish, passes, draws passes, while I start Geomancying up, and he's forced to scoop because he knows when I have too many turns of doing whatever I want, it's just over. So I took like a tempo knockout, knowing that his hand was pretty dead, or at least expecting his hand was dead. I basically had to read that his hand's either dead or it's a Sycamore that he doesn't want to use. because he's simply attach passed, and you know, most of the time people do more than attach pass. So taking like a tempo knockout against him ended up me winning game 2 before it even began, really. So round 2 is a nice win against a very good player who got pretty unlucky against me that he prized 2 ends in game 1. In round 3, I'm up against the Volcanion. Fortunately for me, this is not like a Kiawe version. It's actually a more traditional Brooklet Hill Max Elixir build. He actually played 0 Kiawe. And now that I have Field Blower in my list, I'm much happier than I used to be against Volcanion. And this is just a fairly routine matchup. Basically, if they ever whiff an Elixir, they lose the game. And they whiffed one of their Elixirs. I believe he played 3. I actually play this guy later on in the tournament in day 2. So it was a good player and a good list that obviously got him far, even though he didn't play Kiawe, which is really interesting to note because I remember testing a lot of Volcanion and not using Kiawe all that much. But there's 2 different schools of thought with fire decks right now. You can go super Kiawe mode with Ho-Oh Salazzle, or you can go like 1 Kiawe in a Volcanion deck. And my opponent actually chose to play no Kiawe, which really, really changes the matchup. If they play Kiawe, they're pressuring on turn 2 with a lot of HP, and that's really, really bad for Xerneas. So playing against a traditional, slower Volcanion then tips the scales in my favour because I have turns to Geomancy. He can do early power heaters. I can Fairy Garden, move between my Xerneas. I don't care if they get a bit of damage because, you know, later on Volcanion and Turtonators are obviously taking knockouts regardless. So it doesn't matter if they have 50 damage on them or 0 damage on them, you know. So I was able to get a few Geomancies off, then I just ramp into knockouts. That happens both games. So now I'm 3-0. Round 4 I'm up against Metagross. This is actually a pilot using Mark Lutz's list on his channel. So check out Matt Slatz's channel. Mark Lutz is actually the player who wins this event, and he has his Galissapod Garblor list on there, so if you're interested to see more from the Bremen Regionals and seeing results and good lists, Mark is, you know, literally the top ranked player globally right now, so he's pretty good at the game. It's someone using his Metagross list that he had used in League Cups and profiled earlier on, so definitely a good list, and it was really interesting. It was like Sophocles and Octillery focused. In the first game, I ended up having to scoop after Geomancy. I basically Geomancy, looked through my deck, and realized that I have prized 6 energy, 2 of them being double colorless, which means I physically cannot ramp into an amount to knock out Metagross. My opponent also did not have to Lele for Bridget. They had Bridget in hand, which means I didn't have easy prizes. I think I basically would have had to Geomancy like 2 turns, then go Guzma aggressively on like the Octillery, deal with that. But by the time that was the plan, but I never had Guzma at the time, and against Metagross you have to ramp to 250, otherwise you lose the game. So having prize 6 energy, I had to scoop. But in games 2 and 3, it's much more routine. Game 2 goes very swimmingly. Game 3, I actually prized 2 non-EX, or not non-EX, just regular basic Xerneas. But fortunately, because I was aggressive enough with, like, the Metagross deck puts no pressure on early, right? So it doesn't matter that I only had 2 Xerneas. I actually only had 2 Xerneas the entire game, but because I was grinching down the Metagross before he was starting to attack, I 6-0 him, basically. So, yeah, that was pretty good. Metagross is a really weird matchup. It's a matchup that you will either go 6-0 or you'll just lose, because you have to get to the golden number. If you don't, you've lost the game, because they will just do their Metagross things and, you know, retreat Max Potion, retreat Tapu Cure, retreat, you know, keep knocking out your dudes, and your board depletes every time they take a knockout, and you're scrambling to get more resources back. But as long as they have, you know, like slow turns, I guess you could call it, but it's actually really hard for Metagross to go fast against you. They essentially have to be like, attach aggressively to Beldams and get a rare candy on 2, and you have to not have EXP shares established, and they then need to, on the following turn, have another Metagross ready when you have enough to geotech systems and reattach again. It's like really specific for them to go aggressive, but they have to go aggressive to beat Xerneas. This is what I have to keep stating. I don't even feel Xerneas is a great deck. Like, I love Xerneas, and I played it just because it was like a fallback option for the tournament. I won't be playing it again because, firstly, like, it's a more known quantity now, because more people have had experience against it. There was 6 UK players playing different renditions of Xerneas BREAK in Bremen. I think there was a few other players doing it as well, but I didn't really get to see their lists or what they were going for. But I know the UK have been hot on Xerneas BREAK just because Luke Kirkham, basically the originator of the deck, is a UK player, and he's sort of been tearing up League Cups and stuff, so it's inspired a few people around here. But yeah, Xerneas BREAK is not a deck that I think is good anymore because, first of all, I've not got to the auto loss yet, but also, if you just think about how to beat Xerneas, it's really easy. It's just pressure early. That's all you require. A lot of the time that does require to draw well, so you can't help the fact that you draw badly and can't beat Xerneas. That's just a factor. But if you change your play, like, a Metagross shouldn't really attach aggressively to Beldams in the early turns. They don't really care. They should just be discarding energy so that they can get multiple Geotechs later on when they get their Metagross out. But really the play is to get one Metagross out against Xerneas as quickly as possible. If you manually attach, discard 1 energy, on turn 2, go Candy Metagross, reattach 1 Geotech, you've won the game. Like, you outright win. I think there's no way you can win as a Xerneas player, so unless they like literally have no other cards in their hand and can't develop a second Metagross the following turn. But like, all those pieces require a lot of things, and it requires them to lead Beldam, it requires them to not have to retreat Beacon, you know, it requires a lot of pieces, so decks can have a really good time against Xerneas, but they need to draw pretty well in order to do that. So yeah, just bear that in mind, really. So then we're 4-0. In round 5, I face a Gardevoir player. First game, I can't remember how I lost this. It was definitely a loss, but I can't remember how. I think they just they got turn 2 Guardy and were just pressuring me down, which is pretty good. Like I say, that's the way you beat Xerneas. You start pressuring. Very simple. I think he actually did an Infinite Force for 60. And I couldn't find Garden, so then the following turn he finished off my Xerneas back on his turn 3 and then just sort of continued attaching while I had to re-Geomancy a bunch. I believe I also digged and missed one of my 4 choice bands, which was pretty grim, for a knockout on a turn. So yeah, that's how I lost one game, but then the other 2 games are more routine, where I'm able to win. It's actually a Sylveon build that I was up against. Didn't get plead, which is really good, because Gardevoir Sylveon is the auto loss that I was talking about. It's only an auto loss if they play 1 card, and that card is Parallel City. Jack played a Sylveon Guardy in Bremen with 1 Parallel City. It basically gives you outs against all of your really bad matchups. For example, if you're up against a Metagross, you can Guzma up something useless, you can Parallel, and then you can play 2 of their other Pokemon back into their hand, and all their energy back into their hand as well. So they pretty much have less activations of Geotech remaining, and they'll have to like manually attach up their only Metagross left on their field. Or if their bench is really bad, you can get rid of everything useful and leave them with like 2 Lele on the board. So they have to play really carefully as the Metagross player. They really have to be careful with their bench. Even things like an Alolan Vulpix being put into play will physically lose them the game if you play Parallel Plea in Guardy and you can pull it off on the right turn with a Guzma. So yeah, that was really cool, and I think a lot of the successful Bremen lists of Gardevoir were playing Sylveon and Parallel. So that's a really interesting development, and that development in the metagame makes me really scared to play Xerneas, because, as I said at the start of the video, one of my first questions when looking at a deck was, can I beat Gardevoir? And now Xerneas actually has to say no as the answer, whereas previously I was, you know, targeting, I guess you could say, targeting Guardy, because they need to have a very specific couple of turns in order to pressure us. just through the nature of being a stage 2 and having to ramp up a bunch of energy. I guess Gallade is the scariest thing in Guardy because they can turn to Candy and start getting sensitive blades off, but you know, you can progress into breaks just to have the extra HP in those circumstances as well, so even that's not too scary. They end up having to like Guzma around, and then they hurt their own development of their bench, so in theory, against like the world's list, you know, like the Octillery, Vulpix, Guardies, you're golden. But against the Sylveon parallel Guardies, which were successful in Bremen, Xerneas is like, it's an auto loss. So I was able to win, even though it was a Sylveon list, just because my opponent never got a playoff. I think they had a couple of slow turns here and there. I believe actually he was playing, it was either a 1-1 Sylveon or he just got really unlucky with prizes. It may have been a 2-1 line, because I know in one of the games he attached to an Eevee as his first search, and it wasn't in there, which was really insane for me. In game 3, I remember targeting down the Sylveon before it could get a playoff, so that was pretty good. But yeah, parallel play like wrecks Xerneas, it really does. But yeah, fortunately we dodged that in round 5. So in round 6 we're 5-0, and we face good old Reklev playing Drampa with a 1-1 Espeon GX in there as well. I get to go first, game 1, and just do good old Xerneas things. He misses the turn 2 knockout by missing Potown. That's his activation for Drampa getting high damage Berserks, which means I have an extra turn to Geomancy, which means I can then get knockouts and just simply announce live stream 3 times to win. Actually, he scoops, but you know, my board's built, and I deal with his first Drampa. His second one's not ready. You know, it's simple. I think I used like 3 items as well. So in game 2, I lead a good old Oranguru, and can't move him for a couple of turns because I Sycamore, find no basics, then I Sycamore again, find no basic energy. So I scoop pretty quick. And in the 3rd game I lead, guess who? It's Oranguru again. And I have a hand of DCE, 2 choice, 1 EXP share, 1 elixir. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can't remember what I drew, but it wasn't helpful. I think it was like a stretch or a rod or something. It was really bad. So I attached DCE, Sycamore away all those items, and draw no Pokemon. So I can't even pay retreat. So then he can use Drampa's first attack to get rid of my DCE, which ramps me, which you know takes 40 damage off the board and means I can't move Oranguru again. And then the following turn, I can't get into Xerneas with energy plus elixir plus Fairy Garden, which is basically the 3 things I would need to try and start getting energy back onto the board. So he just starts tearing through me, and I'm just like, yeah, Xerneas. Basically, when Xerneas starts to lose, it just spirals out of control into like, you've lost the game. So basically, when I had those first 2 like super slow turns, the game was just over. So I just give Todd the win. But yeah, really good games. I don't feel Drampagarb's like your best matchup at all. They need to hit the turn 2 Drampa to win the game. If they do, it becomes a very close game. It depends on how many elixirs you've used, how many Geomancies you've been able to pull off, if you can find choice bands, and if you can keep up. You could consider playing things like Enhanced Hammers. We've done that before in Xerneas Break. I feel like Drampagarb's not popular enough to start teching against it. It's also quite good for Galissapod Garb at the same time though, so maybe that's a consideration. I think from my 60 cards, the Field Blower was the weakest card in my list. That's the only card that I feel I have a huge amount of wiggle room for. Like, I wouldn't feel bad about cutting that. That's one of the 2 different changes me and Timau Cameron, the top 8 Xerneas Break player, had. He played no Field Blower, I played 1. He played 3 Lele, 4 N, instead of the split I have, and then he played No Blower for the 30 XP share, which I kind of would like EXP share just for access of it. But I kind of want to wiggle in Enhanced Hammers if Drampergarb and Glitzboggarb continue to see play, which, you know, the top 4 of Bremen was 4 Garbodor decks, 2 of them being Glitzpod, 2 of them being Grampa. So, you know, they're probably going to be a bit more popular. Maybe Enhanced Hammers go back into this deck if it is something to consider again. But at the same time, I'm not going to play this deck again, I don't think, because of Parallel Plea. I feel like that's maybe the best way to play Gardevoir. I'm not sure. But it definitely improves. Like, it gives you a chance against even Metagross, so that's appealing. So yeah, that's something, I guess. But yeah, Drampergarb's not the easiest matchup when you don't play Hammers, so didn't feel too bad to lose, especially when I was already 5-0. Like, losing there, I sort of had flashbacks to the North American Internationals where I was 4-0 and then plummeted and didn't make cut. Got a little bit nervous, but, you know, I was top table against Tord, so I was like, yeah, my resistance is sick. I can just, you know, win one more game and then start IDing, which in round 7, I end up facing an Espeon Garbodor, and they are playing no Parallel. And Espeon Garbodor is also potentially a sticky matchup if they do play Parallel. It's actually Simon Eriksson who's playing 4 Acerola in his list, and Acerola doesn't do anything against this deck because we ramp to 200 and then just start smashing. So instead of playing Parallel, which is a really nuts card against Xerneas, he plays 4 dud cards essentially. So the matchup was very difficult for him. I was always able to get out of confusion either by Fairy Gardening or Break Evolving at the turns, so I never missed a beat really, and that was a fairly routine win, and a couple of wins there, which puts me at 6-1, which means I'm guaranteed, which is awesome. In round 8, I'm actually down paired. I was hoping to intentionally draw, but I was the 1-6-1 player who was down paired. I end up going up against Decidueye Ninetales, and this is something I was really surprised to see this high up on the tables. Only 1 loss so far for them. They were 5-1-1 at the time, and yeah, he ended up telling me that he didn't face any Garbodor deck or any Fire deck, which made a lot more sense to me. I know a few people are sort of hyping Decidueye Ninetales. One made it into top 32 in Bremen. I don't know how far he got, if he got top 16 or not, but there was one in there who sort of squeaked in. Unfortunately, not this player. It was a different player who made it. French player, I believe. And yeah, this is actually a weird matchup. Again, this is a matchup that we tested more when we had Enhanced Hammers in the deck, and we were much happier when we had E-Hammer in than we are now. In game 1, I'm able to win fairly routinely. Decidueye is actually harder than like Metagross, I would say. The HP is effectively the same. You know, the choice band could be an energy, I guess, is the only difference, because 240 and 250, so you still have to ramp really high. But unlike Metagross, who is not pressuring you for like 3 turns, you're getting hit with like Ninetales, and you're getting the odd Feather Arrow here and there, and then late game they're doing more than a Metagross ever would, and they're doing it all over the shop rather than just in the active position. So much scarier matchup than I thought it was going to be, especially when we don't have the Enhanced Hammers. I'm able to win game 1. Game 2, I won game 1 by like grinching down the Lele's on his board to round out the game. In game 2, I lead Lele pass. It's like another game that this happens, which is really gross. And I'm passing for like 2 turns. He gets me to 150, at which point I top deck an N, which then gets me, I believe it was Xerneas Oranguru, which meant I just sort of carried on playing. And because I wanted to ID anyway, I was like, okay, let's just make, if I'm going to lose this game, which is likely at this point, I'll go down 2 prizes. I've not got any energy on the board. If I'm going to lose this game, I'm going to make him take 6 prizes. I'm not going to concede and go for the win. I'm just going to go for the actual tie, like the unintentional tie, because a tie is all I require. So although I was pretty much out of the game, I think I took like 3 prizes eventually, but that was down to me like N-ing and preserving as much as I could and just moving between attackers just to geomancy and just keep energy all around. I made the game go long to the point where there was 3 minutes remaining for game 3. We both have our opening hands. He shows me Lele Bridget, and then I show him Bridget, and we just tie. He was fairly content with the tie because I think his resistance was pretty good, he was saying. So if he just won his last round, he would be in on resistance anyway. So a tie was like as good as a win, I guess. If I don't know, he was like, the tie's not too bad for him either, so he wasn't too sad about the tie, especially after losing game 1. So yeah, the tie, I think we were both fairly content with in the end in round 8. And then in round 9, I just ID, putting myself on a 6-1-2 record, which is guaranteed. It in fact got me 6th seed at the end of day 1 because Tord took all the points. He was 8-0-1. And then I think it was just Robin Schultz who was on like a 7-1-1 record. So there was a handful of 6-1-2s, then a bunch of 6-2-1s. And I think 1 or 2 people squeaked in on lower records as well. But yeah, pretty routine day for me, facing lots of different decks, which is pretty good. Pretty good feeling, especially because a lot of other Xerneas breaks were doing well. I think until the last round, every Xerneas break player was in contention of getting points. There was myself and Seb Simmons, who were both guaranteed because we ID'd. Tamao was on winning in, who then made it. Scott Simmons was also in contention. He had winning in, but he was up against a nightmare matchup. It was Gallipod Decidueye, which is like, I was able to tie Decidueye Ninetales, but Gallipod puts on way more pressure than Ninetales with the same amount of HP, way quicker as well. So that's like a nightmare matchup for him. He was up against Gonzalo Ferreira as well, so it's no mug playing the deck either. So yeah, unfortunate that he wasn't able to make it in the final round. He just got like a nightmare pairing. Otherwise, there'd be more Xerneas in cut. Imagine that. But yeah, so in day 2, my first round is against Rainbow Force, the only Rainbow Force in day 2. And I'm able to win the first game comfortably. I believe he started Joltik, I started Lele. He just goes Fury Belt Sycamore, got rid of a bunch of items. He got rid of like Special Charge, Super Rod, Stretcher, Bishop, and like other stuff. And then just had to pass after the Sycamore. So he just had like a really slow start. I was able to then get Geomancy off. The following turn, then he had to Sycamore again. All he could do is find a Xerneas attached to it. And basically, by that point, I could Geomancy again, get myself into 120 damage range on everything. 120 is a really easy number to hit. Arangaroo can do it. Lele's can obviously do it. And Xerneas Break itself gets big damage. So at that point, it was just a really routine win. In game 2, it's good old Lele start, pass, and then he attaches to Xerneas, passes it back to me after Bridgeting, and then I draw, can't do anything, dead. And same thing happens in game 3, which is really, really sad because Xerneas against Rainbow Force, I believe, is favoured. The opponent was playing at least 2 EXP share and 4 max elixirs, so they can chain attackers to an extent, but like it's really clutching at straws to beat Xerneas. Because our energy is already inherently on the board, we're much more likely to goose them over prizes, we're much more easy to access our attackers every single turn and stream them than Rainbow Force ever is. So it's a matchup I was pretty happy to face, but games 2 and 3 were just like a joke. Game 1 went kind of long as well, so we were actually approaching time when game 3 was being started, so I was already annoyed. I was like, I can't believe I've drawn this game. I should have easily won game 2 if only I hadn't dead drawn, and then I'd go ahead and dead draw game 3 and turn that win into a loss. I would have taken the tie. But yeah, there we go. Ended up losing round 1 in like really salty circumstances, and I was like, very good. This is exactly what we want for day 2, huh? Then in round 2, I face Gardevoir Sylveon. It's actually a player that I played on the first day, but now he knows the matchup, and he does go for Parallel Plea, and I literally cannot win. So that is a cheeky little loss in round 2 that was very routine and not surprising to me at all. When I saw it was him again, I was like, oh, please tell me he's still not figured out the matchup. Please tell me he can't get the combo off, but he was able to, and he destroyed me. In the next round, I faced the Volcanium player that I played in day 1, and as I said, his list is just not easily equipped to beat mine, so they were relatively routine win-wins. Volk can bring it close just by aggressively racing, but I always felt fairly in control when I had N on my side. They were a Starmie build rather than artillery, so me actually lowering their hand size prevented them getting things going on their side, which was pretty good. And round 4, we're up against the straight Gardevoir, a much more typical list that I was expecting to see more of. And this is the first game I win quite routinely. It's really boring to me saying it's like a routine win, but it's literally Xerneas does the same thing every time. It's like Geomancy, go, Geomancy, go, Geomancy, go, and then livestream, Gosma livestream. That's like how I win. That's like how Xerneas just plays. It's such a dull deck. But yeah, that's just how it is. So when I say routine win, that's kind of what I mean. I mean, I was given time to Geomancy, so I won. And then then I lose the second game. I can't remember how. I think he went aggro Gallade, and I think specifically he did it when I didn't have EXP shares on board. There's a turn where he KO'd the active. That was fine. I bring up a break and Geomancy. So I broke Evolve just so that I could protect my Xerneas. I attached manually to that one to have 2 energy on it to protect it, but I Geomancy 2 more energy onto both other Xerneas, which aren't broke, which are still basics. Then he's able to pull off like a Guzma play. Got rid of a choice banded double energied Xerneas, which was really bad for me. Which then put me like just 1 energy away from Guzma and KOing his benched Guardy, which like would almost certainly have won me the game. I also missed 2 elixirs on the turn that I needed to hit one of them, which was really bad. So I ended up losing the second game, and that was a pretty long drawn out second game, so I ended up tying. This is actually another UK player, Simon Humphreys, and I was in fairly decent. We just had like a really nice, polite game. I played against him before, and we know each other, so it was a chilled out game, even though it was like, you know, we were both trying to win 2 more to get to 29 points at the time, and hoping that 29 points could squeak us into cut. But yeah, tie is kind of fine. It means we can both win the last game to get into top 16, or hope to at least, get ourselves to 27 points. And that means in round 5, I'm not playing for top 8, I'm just playing for top 16. And I'm up against Glisspod Garbodor, and these are a really weird series. I'm able to win game 1 where both of us are doing nothing. Typically, if Xerneas is doing nothing, it loses the game. Fortunately, our opponent was doing an equal amount of nothing, and we were able to eventually draw into a fair energy and start getting Geomancies off, and that is basically all I required to win. I believe they even got down to like 1 prize just by doing like Lele pokes on all sorts of things for ages, and just like Coco flipping around. But yeah, we were able to win game 1 when both of us basically had nothing. Game 2, I have literally nothing and lose. Game 3, I'm able to set up and just dominate the board and win, which puts me at an 8-3-3 record at the end of day 2, and that puts me on 27 match points, which was enough to get me in exactly 16th. So I squeaked in on resistance, thankfully. Didn't want to be another bubble boy like I've already been in Liverpool, getting 34th instead of in top 32. Grrr. But yeah, finally breaking the curse of bubbling forever, hopefully. So yeah, I was able to get a cheeky 80 points instead of 60, which actually means I have my Worlds invite. 250 is all you require in Europe. It is a bit of a joke. It is way too easy. The fact that people... Well, look at my performances. I've got a top 16, a top 64, and a top 32 in the Anaheim Open. So 3 regionals. I haven't gone into the top 8 of any of them, and yet I have a Worlds invite. It feels like, you know, my performances so far have not been, you know, a cream of the crop, best in, you know, best around the globe performances. I've also had like a League Cup second and a League Cup top 16, I think, is literally all my points. So these are all like, you know, mediocre, and being able to attend Worlds for mediocrity just doesn't make me feel good about the invite, especially because it's so early in the season, because now I'm sort of torn. I'm in a place where I can go for top 16/top 22 in Europe, and that's basically what I went for last season. I know how much of a grind that is. It is a real slog trying to juggle commentating whenever I'm given the chance, as well as playing, both, you know, for my job and money-wise and time-wise and testing and stress and all these things. It is a grind to go for top 22, especially this year, even more so because there's no limit on regionals. So essentially the top 22 could be dominated by who can attend more events, and that makes it even less skill-based, which is kind of gross, really. I really want that to be something that's addressed by Pokemon, not this season. Don't do any mid-season changes, please, Pokemon. Don't do that. But next year, when the points settle down and we realise that, yes, too many people were at Worlds this year, we can, you know, address some of these issues of having a cap to regionals. It really means that it's pay to win right now in Pokemon, and that's not a great thing. I would much rather there'd be a limit, even if it's not 8, even if it's just like 10 or 12. That's still like a silly amount, you know, but at least there's a cap there, so people can't just go here, there, everywhere, gathering, you know, top 128 points and somehow just go above someone who maybe like won a regional but could only attend 3, for example. So, you know, these are just a few gripes I have. I know I'm rambling a bunch in this video, but I just sort of at the point now where I have my Worlds invite, so I feel like I'm in a reflective kind of mood. But yeah, so I don't know whether I'm going to be chasing the top 16 just yet. There's a League Cup next weekend. I don't think I can attend, which is pretty annoying. I need to bump my top 16 performance if I want to keep progressing and getting points. But yeah, the following weekend, the 30th of September, to the beginning of October, that is the Bilbao special, which I'm going to be commentating, which is expanded, which is really exciting. But again, there's going to be people starting to pass me on points, and that's a scary thing because it's the 30th of November, which is the cutoff date for stipends for Australia, and that is definitely an internats that I want to go to. It's an opportunity that I didn't take last season. I wasn't in top 16 or anything, and it's not like I threw away money, but I didn't realise just how broken internats are. And for points, internats are absolutely stupid broken. So if you can get to internats, definitely do that. And also just having been to London as a commentator and participating in Brazil and participating in America, even though I didn't have stellar performances, they were still some of the most crazy fun weekends. And experiencing those high-level, high-pressure tournaments makes you a better player, so they are always good things to attend. So it's definitely on my radar to really hope to go to Australia. I think I would require a stipend in order to attend, just because of where I'm at financially. But if I can get that top 16, it would be incredible. But the fact is, I'm not doing the special event. I'm not doing, you know, as many League Cups as I could go to. There are definitely people attending more regionals and stuff. And one of the big ones is whether or not I am able to play in London. Obviously, if I'm given the opportunity to commentate, I always will pick commentating. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But it is, you know, a double-edged sword in my position where I'm at now, because I'm essentially saying that I can't get a stipend for Australia. So although there's a chance that I could just bomb London regardless, just do terribly, because there's so many points on offer. Even like a top 128 finish gives you a stupid amount of points. It's like 100 or something. So everyone and their grandma's going to be ahead of me in points by the time London's finished, and that is before the 30th of November. So I have to grind more than anyone else if I want to make it to Australia, if I do end up commentating London. So I'm in a really precarious position. position whether or not to grind as hard as possible or just to give up now and say I'm probably going to be a day one player at the end of the day, unless I win an internats or something, and then just boost my way up in a jammy fashion, because I'm really hoping, I think I'll definitely go to US again. It was just such a good experience, and a lot of good friends out there as well that I'd love to see again. And it was just such a great weekend. Like, that weekend was as good as Worlds, and I didn't think an experience like that would be as good as Worlds. Or it's very different to Worlds, but it's also like, because there were so few UK players, it didn't feel as like much of a community as the Worlds did this year. It was just me, Tamao, and Ryan Morehouse, but it was, the event itself was really cool, especially because we were playing a rogue Xerneas and we were both doing well at the start of the day, and then it did sort of plummet, but the whole weekend was like crazy good. So I definitely want to go to America again. Like, that will happen. It's whether or not I go to Australia or Brazil again, and whether or not I can do both. Like, if I could do both, that'd be crazy and amazing, but I don't think I'll have the funds or the time off work to do both of them. I really want to go to Australia if possible, so that's going to be a goal of mine, but I don't know if I just sort of let my dreams die now and just chill out and just focus on the channel for a bit more. That could also be a way to go, who knows. But yeah, man, I've been rambling for a while. Let's just talk about what else is going to go on to the channel. We're going to be going back to deck analysis for Standard very soon. I'm going to do Grandpa tomorrow. I'm going to do Espeon Garb. I'm going to do Ninetales. Big updates on some of those. I've made a lot of changes to those decks, and there's been recent League Cup performances, especially for Ninetales, which has surprised me and how they are now played, which is very interesting and cool. Then I'm going to be doing the top 10 decks. That's something I was meant to do last week, but I was busy actually testing for Bremen, which I think you guys can all respect, I guess. It's a bit annoying that we didn't get it out in time. Jack also had internet problems. I had problems with my computer. It took 2 days to do like just random updates. It was really annoying. But yeah, that top 10 list is definitely going to come out. Now we have results from Bremen to actually sculpt the list a little bit cleaner rather than just our opinions of top 10. So it's not the worst thing in the world that we had to wait on that, but we'll get the top 10 out very soon. And then it's on to Expanded, because I've already said I'm commentating, Jack's going to be testing. So on the stream tomorrow and in the next few weeks of streams, it's all going to be Expanded. So if you are looking forward to some Expanded stuff, this is the place to be, I guess. So there'll still be Standard in between just to keep people going, but Expanded is going to be back on the focus for us here at OmniPoke. So yeah, lots of rambling. Let me know what you think I should do, guys. Do I go as hardcore as possible? Try and get lucky and win a big event and go for day 2? It was so disappointing last year not making top 22 after all the effort I put in. Or do I just say, you know what, if I'm going to try and juggle commentary and play in the same season, I should just be content with 250 and try and get through day 1, which is something I've not been able to do the last 2 years, where maybe one day I'll get good, who knows. But yeah, I don't know, some people like hearing these rambly videos, and it's something you can just stick on in the background, I guess. But tomorrow I'll be back with good old deck analysis. It'll be Drampa Garb. Got very close to winning this weekend, so it is definitely still a very good deck, as are all the Garbodor variants. And there'll be plenty more on the channel as well, so stay tuned, everyone. Thanks for listening to me ramble about Xerneas. Hope you enjoyed the list. Hope you don't play the list, because Parallel Plea is hideous. And I feel like I've basically spilled the beans on how everyone can beat Xerneas. So, sorry everyone who wanted to play this. It's over. The dream is dead. But yeah, onwards and upwards. Nice result. Great weekend in Bilbao. It was awesome. Everyone who I roomed with, and everyone who I spoke to throughout the weekend, everyone who even just came up to say hey, take a photo again. I always love it. So thanks everyone, and I'll be seeing you in another video very soon. Bye bye.